Avowed is shaping up to be this year's second Bloodlines 2, aka a middling RPG that people expected to be much more. When Avowed was first revealed, it had a much darker aesthetic than we've been shown since. The real colourful style they've shown off since the big reveal 6 months ago, it's just kind of turned people off. And that's the vibe I'm getting across the board. It's very hard to find people who are genuinely excited about this game. You would think with it being an Obsidian title, there'd be sort of a core group of RPG fans that would be interested, but I can't find them. I can't find people who are genuinely looking at Avowed itself and going, this game is doing great things. There's excuses being made. I'm seeing people say, Avowed's great, people are just hating on it because it's an Xbox, it's a Microsoft title, but they can't actually pinpoint what is good about this game. And what we've got here is more gameplay, essentially. The Direct itself that we saw a few days ago, it showed off snippets of gameplay, but it was kind of cobbled together. I don't feel that we got sort of a long gameplay sequence. But they have revealed a bit of that. There's been some Xbox podcasts and videos have gone out that do show more. So we're going to look at that to start with. So you can see the combat encounter, and it is alpha gameplay. This isn't finalized. They're not just sort of purely fixing bugs. So I don't want to hate on it to the point of just saying this is it, because I think if we're too harsh on alpha gameplay, then developers might be more quiet. They might not show as much footage before release, which I don't think is a good thing. I want them to feel like they can show off an unfinished product. But there is also that expectation that gamers still need to be shown something that's interesting. You can't show garbage and say, oh, it's unfinished, don't be so harsh, because we need a reason to be excited about your product. And what I'm seeing here, it's not exciting. The combat seems to be the main point of Avowed. It's not really this well-rounded RPG where you can do everything, explore major cities, like, say, Baldur's Gate in Baldur's Gate 3. We've seen it in many CRPGs, huge sprawling cities and towns to explore. I don't think there's going to be that many of them in Avowed. It seems like there might be one major city, but outside of that, it's just little settlements, tiny sort of hubs with maybe a handful of people in them, and that's part of the lore as well. I believe Avowed, where it's set in Aora in the Pillars of Eternity setting, it is sort of a wilderness environment. It is just very much a combat-filled, enemy-filled landscape. So the combat is what you're going to be doing the bulk of the time, and it doesn't look good. There's nothing too interesting about it that I'm seeing at all. It seems like they were very scared to actually put in-depth systems, have it really feel like that CRPG kind of combat system. They just wanted it to be very much like Skyrim, make it accessible for the masses, and I don't think that's going to hold up in 2024. People expect more depth. And even if we ignore Baldur's Gate 3 for 1 second with sort of a party-based combat system, turn-based, even games like Dark Souls, I think they changed the game a bit. Skyrim might have been popular in 2011, but Dark Souls really took off after that. And not every game has to have Dark Souls combat, but that is an example of action combat that keeps you interested. What I'm seeing here, it's just really lazy animations. It looks overly clunky. I don't need the most polished game in the world. It is Obsidian. They're not known for the most polished games ever. But it's just so slow and really geriatric almost. It's hard to get thrilled about. And you kind of know it's just going to be really easy as well. And I'm just talking about the fundamentals of the game. Sure, you can probably put it on hard mode or something, but if hard mode is simply the enemies have more health, you've got less health, you take more damage, that's not something I care about too much. It's just the way it's been designed from the ground up will be about accessibility for everyone. And given the game seems to be mostly this sort of combat, I just don't know. You can swim, and he does mention this, he gets excited about swimming, you'll hear in a second, these developers. But I don't think Starfield had the great swimming and the diving, so they've got something. But you can just kind of feel how slow it is. They just don't really do anything. I mean, if we go back just slightly, like the enemies just seem to like stumble around and run into you, and then you hit them with your sword, and they don't react at all. Like they don't get pushed back. There's just nothing. And I know it's alpha, but if this is what you've been focused on, this game has been in development for years. It's been like 4 or 5 years. This isn't a brand new project or anything like that. I've seen people say, oh, they've got a year's worth of development to go, it's going to be fine. I don't think they're going to drastically change the game in 12 months if it's taken them this long to get this together, this half a decade pretty much. I think this is, for the most part, going to be what it is. Sure, they'll polish up the animations and things, and this video's on Twitter, so it's not the highest of quality, but the animations of the blood, for instance, it's not good at all. It just looks amateurish, something you would find in like an Unreal fan project of a PS1 N64 remake, something like that. I can see what people are saying when they've just lost hype. It's like, a lot of games will have some sort of hook that gets you in, but this has nothing. There's nothing I can see that it's doing particularly well, and it would be fine if the combat was like 30% of the game or something, and you had these big cities to explore. It was all about stories, it was all about dialogue, but that seems really weak in Avowed. I would be shocked if it's even as in-depth as in the Outer Worlds. I think there may even be less of it in this. I remember when they showed off the Outer Worlds, the first thing, I believe, at least from memory that stuck in my head, was showing off that you'd be making decisions and choices. I remember they showed you, I think, going to the first town and making a decision. They really put that to the forefront, and they haven't done this with Avowed. They focused very much on the combat, and the combat just seems to suck. I don't know about it. It's just so slow, and maybe this player's like slowed himself down for the purposes of the video, but you just sort of wander around, you're in no great rush. Let's not get overexcited. I'm just not feeling the fun factor. Nothing about this looks fun. If I'm playing this for 40 hours, and 30 of those hours is this combat, I don't know, like, I've seen other enemies show up in, like, some other trailers that have popped around, little snippets, and there is a bit of variety. It's not purely whatever these things are. They've got a name from Pillars of Eternity, I can't remember. But the other enemies, it just seems like more of the same, just these enemies that sort of surround you and very slowly amble about, and then you just whack them with your sword, or you use your dual wands or your guns or whatever there is. But I can't see what's really going to sell people on this really slow action combat, not a lot of CRPG influence, because the design of this game, it just seems like what might have worked 5 or 6 years ago, when it just appeared that all RPGs had to be action-based, that you couldn't make anything like an old-school RPG that's focused on the Skyrims, and they probably slowed it down to focus a little bit more on the RPG elements. But I think they've just got the worst of both worlds now. They've got the action, obviously, but they've slowed that right down to add in the RPG stuff, but that's going to be dumbed down as well because they don't want to confuse people. I'll touch on it in a second, but they have removed classes from this. So you are playing a classless character, which I think is fine for the Elder Scrolls. That is Bethesda's thing these days. It's worked for them on their games that have done well, but you just get the feeling Obsidian purely did this to try and appeal to the mainstream. I don't know if it's their strength. Again, a classless system can work, especially in an action game, but if they've done it for the wrong reasons, then I think it's just going to be another fail. They don't have any strengths from what I'm seeing. Slow combat, not great RPG systems, the story, the characters don't look good. I understand why people are totally underwhelmed. And if we look into some more of this, I've started to look at what's going on with Avowed. Is this a project that was in a good place? Is this really their vision? And I don't think it is. I think this game has actually been in development hell to some extent, and that's part of the reason we're seeing what we have been, which is something that's very underwhelming. We can see here, and this is from a gaming forum about a year or two ago. So this is older news, but I think it is much more relevant now that we are seeing the state of the game. Part of these rumours came from Chris Avellone, used to work at Obsidian, acclaimed RPG writer, much more talented than probably anyone working on this game. And something that came up that we can see here. My understanding, based on conversations with multiple people close to Obsidian, not named Chris Avellone, but Chris Avellone said some of this stuff as well, is that Avowed has gone through multiple reboots and replaced several directors and leads last year. This was back in 2022, 2021. As I said on Twitter, that's why I don't expect it to be out anytime in the near future. I did not say the game is going through development hell and will never come out, but it has certainly had some real issues. As it turns out, Avellone was the first to mention in public that the game had lost directors. Given his history, people were understandably skeptical. Now, this person's probably insane. They think that because Avellone had some sexual misconduct allegations that were unfounded, they were proven untrue. This person's trying to imply because he was accused of something, we shouldn't believe anything that he says, which is obviously ridiculous. This person has an agenda, so their sanity is in question. But basically, there are multiple sources saying that this game has had lots of people in charge who have left the project because they were probably struggling to put a cohesive game together. And then eventually we ended up with Kerry Patel, who is the current game director. She is previously a writer of novels who moved to the video game industry because it's easier to get a steady paycheck. And I understand, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying that those are her credentials. She's not sort of a veteran RPG game designer. She's mainly a writer and now she's working on this. By no fault of her own, perhaps, because people have left the project, more experienced people. I believe it was Chris Parker, who was one of the co-founders of Obsidian. He has a bit of a legacy. He left this project. He stopped working on it. So again, it seems like it's gone through development hell, and that's why the game just feels underwhelming. It's probably only really had a year or two in the oven, and it shows. We can see that there's just nothing going for it. It seems like it's had really a year or two of being worked on, and it's coming out this year. Microsoft and Obsidian probably feel they can't spend more time on this game. They've got to move on eventually. So they're going to get it out the door, and I don't think it's really going to be finished, and I don't think it's going to resemble a fully feature-complete game that's going to be fun. Gabriel Paramo, now he is the gameplay director. And I think another reason he was one of the main guys in that showcase from the other day is because the game is probably 80% combat. It's mostly just going through these little outer worlds-like areas. It's not an open world, it's smaller scale areas, and you're pretty much just going to be fighting things. You're not going to be doing a lot else. It's going to be this melee combat. I know you can use the spells and the guns and stuff, but most of the time probably has gone into the melee combat to some extent. And if you look at this person's credits, they have never worked on, from what I can see, a single-player role-in game. They did a bit of work on New World, not in a lead role, from what I can see, additional engineering, and that is an MMO from Amazon. Now, the combat in that game is supposedly quite clunky, and it's not going to really transfer over to a single-player RPG. But what else? UFOs Love Cows. It's a mobile game. Killer Instinct, a fighting game for Xbox, one of the new ones. A bunch of junk from Garfield's Fun Fest. Yeah, we're onto the right stuff. So, never worked on a single-player RPG. they've got this person in a lead role. And again, probably no fault of their own. So many people have left the project. This is who they've got now, and I'm not saying the person can't do it. Maybe they're talented, now they're getting their chance. But given how the gameplay looks, the combat looks, I cannot get excited. And we see some of the articles that are doing the rounds now. There's been a lot of negative ones. The mainstream seem to not care about this game very much. I've seen articles saying there's something wrong with Avowed. It's all looking a bit iffy. And the same old fanboys will say, oh no, they're just doing that because it's an Xbox game, a Microsoft game. I don't think so. You just have to look at it. You just have to open your eyes. And nothing's really rocking anyone's socks off. We can see some recent articles. Obsidian's next RPG, Avowed, there won't be an option to do a pure pacifist run. Avowed has a focus on combat. Again, I think that is paramount. I think it's going to be 80, 90% combat. The talking we've seen, they were describing the RPG quest like you talk to someone and then you make a decision. They were making it out like it was really profound, like they've changed the game by having that. It seemed like the absolute bare bones meat and potatoes RPG quest formula, and they were talking it up so much despite barely showing any of it. For that reason, again, I think that's a big deal in the game. There's not going to be that much of it. It's going to show up now and again. There'll be a little bit of dialogue, one-liners, not a lot of decisions, maybe 2-3 dialogue decisions at a time. Keeping in mind it is classless, that's probably going to limit some of the decision-making. It's not as if you can make a class-based choice in dialogue. I wouldn't think so. I think maybe they have backgrounds. Maybe you can choose your background, but certainly not class-based once again. And we can see Avowed companions won't ditch you for making the wrong choices. It's not about maintaining their approval. It's about getting to know them, which basically translates to your companions are basically going to be meat sticks. They're just going to be there in combat, just being a combat dummy, essentially, just hitting things. You can't control them in any way. And in terms of what you do with them, they probably have a quest line, but that's about it. There's no reactivity in terms of the people who journey with you. They're just kind of there. They're not going to be like Baldur's Gate 3 companions. They talk about the RPG Avowed. It's going to have Vermintide Masterclass in combat. So that's the Warhammer 40k game. I don't really know how that combat plays, but from what I'm seeing, it's decent, but I don't think what we've seen from the videos of Avowed is decent. So they can talk all they want about it. We've been influenced by this game and that game, but what translates to screen isn't that. It just looks dull. It just looks boring. And there's certainly some articles about the skillless combat. I'll say again, I don't think it dooms the game. I just think that Obsidian have removed it to chase the mainstream trends. So everything I'm seeing online, it's downplaying this game. And this has been happening for a while. It seems like there'll be comparisons made with Baldur's Gate 3, and Obsidian will have to say, no, but let's be honest, we thought the RPG genre was basically dead in the mainstream, so we've been trying to do action games with a little bit of RPG, maybe like, say, BioWare titles in the 2010s, and now they're scrambling and realized, hang on, Baldur's Gate 3 has sort of brought the RPG back into the mainstream, the CRPG back, and we're stuck doing this. Now we've got to make excuses for why our game is way more dumbed down than the title that just sold something like 25 million copies. Nowhere on the internet is anyone truly excited about this. Xbox fanboys are trying their best, but they can't pinpoint what's good about this game. I didn't set out to hate this one. I thought there'd be some good things about it. I thought in the initial reveal, maybe Obsidian could make this work. Everything they've shown has just been really, really middling, and they've dug themselves a hole. Hype is non-existent, and people are just assuming this game isn't going to be good. If it actually is, and they've just done a bad job showcasing it, they've got a lot of work to do to turn this around, to actually present it to people and convince us that it's good. Because once the perception is out there online that your game is bad, it is extremely hard to shake it. And sure, this will be on Game Pass. Microsoft will be saying, oh my god, there's 5 million players. But how much money are they going to get from this? If it releases, the hype we're seeing right now, which is nothing, if that's going to translate into sales, I think they're going to be very, very low numbers. So Obsidian will have to do much more. I don't have high hopes for it. And for now, probably not an RPG I'm going to see myself recommending to people. So I hope we start seeing more RPG announcements that are more exciting. Show us more of what the genre can do. But we'll have to wait and see. Thanks so much for listening. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers. Bye.